So the other day, one of my colleagues was telling a story about a professional development workshop that he had recently attended, in which the workshop leader was talking about universal design for learning and absolutely misrepresented what universal design for learning is to a room full of professional educators. And though my colleague stood up and tried to address that with this person, a lot of the damage had been done. And it made me think, how often is this happening, where professional development or policy is being written in such a way that doesn't really reflect what universal design for learning is? And whose fault is it? Well, back in 2010, Dr. Dave Edinburgh wrote a well-cited manuscript that opened with the provocative question, would you recognize universal design for learning if you saw it? And among other things, he was critiquing the 1998 Assistive Technology Act, which, among other things, referred to universal design for learning as a scientifically validated practice. And Edinburgh was arguing, how can you call UDL scientifically valid if we have not even operationalized it? Because science requires an operationalized variable that is tested repeatedly, and that's just not true of universal design for learning. Dr. Kavita Rao and her colleagues in 2014 underscored, I think, the importance of what Edinburgh was driving at in his 2010 manuscript. They reviewed some 200 or more manuscripts that refer to universal design in education or universal design for learning and different frameworks and models. And they said, they have a great quote, let me read it to you. They said, a barrier to the establishment of efficacy of the universal design for learning frameworks, universal design frameworks in education, has been the lack of clear definition of what constitutes an intervention that is universally designed. There is no consensus on how UD principles should be applied, nor is there agreement as to how much or in what combination the principles or guidelines of any model, which includes UDL, need to be present for educational intervention to be universally designed. Now, this is 2014 that they wrote this. That means that UDL had been around for about 20 years, and we've still, in the literature, have not come to consensus on what it looks like or how it is practiced in a way that can be generalized from our research. Reading these two manuscripts and seeing other things like that professional development workshop where things weren't quite right, or seeing things like in the Every Student Succeeds Act where universal design for learning is listed, but it's listed as a provision for students with disabilities, it seems like we get it wrong and we get it wrong and we get it wrong. And yet it's hard for me to blame the policymakers, the professional development workshop leader, because if we have not as a field, as a UDL community, clearly defined and operationalized what this framework is and what it looks like, then how can we expect those who are on the fringe or on the outside to do it? In this UDL talk, I want to explore those questions a little bit. I want to help the audience to ask the questions of, why is it so hard to operationalize UDL? And moreover, how has UDL accomplished the kind of success that it has in spite of the fact that it has struggled to be operationalized? Now, at this point in the field, I think that simply stating that problem isn't enough. I think that's been done really well by people like Edinburgh and Rao and others in the field, and I think people already know that that problem is there. But I think that we continue to use the same kind of approaches to solving it that have not worked over and over and over. Specifically, I think we are trying to use modernist scientific paradigms that are very popular and very powerful in education for universal design for learning, which defies that prescribed, structured, operationalized approach that has been so successful for other things. That is to say, at its heart, universal design for learning is about flexibility. It's about provision of options. It's about allowing my students to make choices, things that inherently defy prescriptiveness and rigidity that are at the heart and spirit of modern science, I think. And so any attempt that we make to operationalize UDL might work temporarily for research, but ultimately hurts practice of UDL. and therefore it doesn't really make sense. And I think we come back to this over and over and over. So what I want to present is for us to try to move beyond the modern definition of operationalizing to try something else. I'm going to propose a postmodern solution in which we try to operationalize UDL not as a definition per se, where we boil it down to a checklist, 2 principles from three principles and draw 2 checkpoints from each. Nothing like that. That just doesn't really make sense in practice. Instead, I'm going to propose approaching the operationalization of UDL as a territory, having clear boundaries of what would disqualify a practice from being UDL, and having the framework elements at the heart of it. So if we see these framework elements, and if those boundary lines are not crossed, then we could say a practice is UDL. This would develop a rich territory in which the practice of UDL could thrive, and in which, with qualitative elements, researchers could identify how they are in fact justifying that a certain practice, a certain intervention is a UDL intervention, and practitioners could use the exact same territorial definition, operationalization, to demonstrate that they are in fact UDL practitioners. Now, I don't claim to be the one who's going to crack this incredibly complex and difficult issue that's been haunting us for so long. But I think that this kind of idea, then the way I'm going to present it and the way I'm going to engage the audience, will allow us to start a conversation. And it's a conversation that I think we need to have, and we need to have together, and we have to have it soon. And what better place than the 2017 UDL-IRN Summit?